Hello and welcome back to the latest edition of Rowan Consulting Shed Talks. My name is Karen Watkins. I am your host and founder of Rowan Consulting. Our Shed Talks are designed to cover a range of subjects and topics, designed to inform and equip business owners and leaders with helpful and hopefully practical advice on leading and engaging teams during times of change and growth. Today's subject is vast and wide and broad, but is very current. Today's subject, we will be talking about what does it mean to be a leader right now. We know that pre-pandemic, generally we saw much more of a management style of the command and control, and the pandemic has changed the way that we're stepping into more of a new style of leadership. Where we are seeing an increased emphasis on engagement and collaboration and the role of a convener with our teams. So what comes next in this next stage of leadership? And as we start to see a further shift in the way that we work and full throttle back onto restarting the economy, what skills do we need in order to ensure continuity and sustained leadership? And what skills do we need to be able to lead in today's ever-changing environment?
To help me develop and facilitate this conversation, I have invited not one, but two guests into the shed today. And I'm delighted this could get very interesting because we have two Sarahs in the shed today. So welcome, ladies. Welcome to the conversation. Welcome to one of our shed talks. Really delighted that you're here. One thing that to sort of start in terms of your profile. So let's start. Sara King, founder of Loafspark. Sara is a speaker and a leadership guide, a coach and a mentor, and she has over 25 years experience in leadership and organizational development in many different industries and many different sort of sectors, including small charities and SMEs, education, local government, retail, here and abroad. And I think, Sara, your aim is to, which I love, is your aim is to inspire meaningful and compassionate ways to grow an organisation through connection with ourselves and our purpose, which I love. I love it. We also have, I'm very delighted to say that we have Sara Cottrell also joining us, who is leadership consultant, currently working at Zurich, UK. Sara is a UK people team at Zurich, so we have a very interesting conversation with an internal and an external focus from the conversation, which I'm delighted about. Sara also has she's also put 20 plus years. She's not going to give us an exact figure, but we've got 20 plus years experience successfully working with leaders in many different industries and sectors, including, again, SMEs, retail, charity, digital, media and professional services. So between us, ladies, I reckon there's something like 60 years worth of experience here right on screen. So delighted to welcome both of you into the shed. Thank you very much for joining us today. So let's start the conversation then. I'm quite interested to know, as you know, as two sort of leaders, one sort of internal and external, what is your take and what are you seeing in the market sort of right now? Sara King, do you want to sort of start with that?
Yes, I think, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me on today. It's great to be on the Shed Talk with you, Karen, and with you, Sara, too. So what I'm seeing at the moment through different clients in different industries as well, and different kind of size organizations, is really how exhausted everyone is. So there's this kind of general feeling of we're coming towards the end of our pandemic, or we're opening up a little bit more, and just the amount of change, a sudden change through the pandemic and lockdowns and flexible working, and has been a massive amount of change on us as individuals, but also as leaders. And through that, we've been running on adrenaline for the last 18 months and also trying to make sense of the chaos. So, you know, I think when we're in that kind of in a chaotic situation, we almost try to find stability rather than solve the issues. Finding stability is the key. So we've been in that mode. And I think the adrenaline is kind of leaving us as we're settling down into more stability at the moment. And as a result, we're exhausted. You know, we're kind of that. And then one of the main shifts, I think, in leadership, as you mentioned, Karen, is really that shift from a leader or a manager being the controller and the fixer of problems that they see going on in their workplace and in their teams because they're sitting next to people and seeing stuff happen, to suddenly working very remotely, or some of the team working remotely, and having to lead from afar, which has involved a very different skill set, a real kind of skill set that is about trusting people and trusting that we'll hear about difficulties and challenges at work, but we might not necessarily be fixing them ourselves. We're not there to fix them. And I see that, really seeing that quite a lot at the moment, that kind of shift where, you know, managers or people in those roles of influence and power have got there through being very good at fixing and controlling things. And suddenly we're asking them to do something very different. So that changing skill set requires quite a lot of vulnerability and leading through lots of uncertainty. And, you know, I think as a result, we've got leaders who have had to be very empathetic, and that's exhausting. If you do that over 18 months, that's exhausting, really supporting and holding people through, you know, their own struggles within their team. So whether that's mental struggles or physical health struggles, you know, that kind of holding all of that for lots of people, it has been really exhausting.
Sara Cottrell, what are you seeing in the market right now? How are things with your side?
So I think the world of leadership was changing really dramatically before COVID, and the pandemic has really accelerated a lot of that. So we were looking much more to an empathetic, compassionate and human-centric leadership. And I think that COVID has really forced us to recognise that we have to move into that space. And if we've been leading in a different way before, stepping into that space has been quite a challenge for a lot of people. You know, you really have to consider what we were talking to our leaders about in the 80s and 90s around leading from the front and all the things that we asked people to do. So we're really asking our leaders to dig quite deeply into their beliefs and value system to actually make that step change in terms of what they believe the right way to lead is. You know, that it's important to recognise that it's been really difficult. It's been really difficult for our leaders because they've not only had to manage COVID and the implications of working from home and all of those other things, but also really thinking about how they lead and the skills that they need to pull on. And it's not to say they haven't got those things, it's refocused where we need to do that. And because the change has been so swift, we're kind of learning as we go, and that's really stressful. You know, our employees are learning, we're learning, and that's tiring. And as Sara said, it can be exhausting. And you know, we kind of thought that COVID wouldn't last that long. We'd all be back to work and things would return to normal. Well, the world has changed and it's not ever going to go back to the way that it was before. So I think now our leaders are beginning to recognise that actually they need to pick up those skills. There's some stuff that they need to leave behind, and they really need to think about, you know, what are the opportunities moving forward and how do they pick up those skills to ensure that they stay current and relevant in that marketplace and move the organisation so that it also has those sustainable skills as well.
So let's backtrack just a little bit. Let's define in terms of from a listener perspective then, let's define the difference between management and leadership, because I think it's really key that, you know, it feels like we are coming from an area of management, and you know, like you said, from the sort of 90s and sort of, you know, 2000, it has been traditionally management, and we're now looking and we're talking and we're hearing so much more about leadership. So define the difference for me between, or what you see the difference between management and leadership.
I think there's lots of definitions, and we could be here for hours and hours debating over what this is. I think if you're a business owner or you're a leader in an organisation, it's really thinking about what are you there to do, and what's the purpose of your organisation, and what are you trying to achieve, because it's really about choosing what's best and getting the right balance. So management, I think, is the nuts and bolts of running the business, the what, the planning, the organising, the delegating, the controlling your resources. So they're the admin elements of keeping your business functioning. Whereas leadership is the how you do that, how you gauge, how you build those relationships, how you inspire and enable people to bring their best to work and to bring their best to your business every day. And it's that relationship piece and the conversation piece that I think can be quite tiring for somebody who hasn't really used that space before, because people are challenging at times and what they want from you is challenging at times. And actually your ability to give, but particularly when you're feeling tired or stressed, is also really challenging. So I think for a business owner and thinking about leadership, the challenge is really deciding when you need to be in management mode and when you need to be in leadership mode. And actually, it's a blend of the two. You can't have one without the other. It's just not possible to do that.
Yeah, and I think, again, from sort of, business owner perspective, the hat of a business owner, I think the focus is around the management, rather than sort of the leadership. Whereas sort of for the, the sort of high-end sort of SMEs, it's more about the leadership side, I think, but like you said, it's trying to find a balance between the two. I think the challenge is, what we find is that I think the challenge is that they want to be good leaders. I think, there's no doubt about it. People don't, they want to be good leaders. They know and they appreciate the benefits of what being a good leader is. But we did a poll recently, and one of the things which I think came out was other things. I want to be a good leader, but other things keep getting in the way. For example, some of the comments we had was, I just don't have the time, or I don't know what to do first, were some of the things which came out. Sara King, what's your sort of view on that?
Well, I think building on Sarah's good description of like kind of a manager and a leader, I completely agree with what she said, and I think it's and also, Karen, what you said, business owners very much managing, and I think we start off when we have a business doing everything, and then we kind of shift to other people doing stuff for us and with us, but we're still controlling and fixing. We're kind of the go-to person when things go wrong, or where something, when a decision needs to happen. And almost the next stage of kind of evolution in that journey is to kind of start to ask yourselves the question about, well, so what do I let go of, and what do I enable others to do? And that's not a binary thing. It's a gradual process. So as an organization gets bigger, then the person who's overseeing that organization has to go through that journey. What do I let go of, and what do I enable others to do? And I think it comes back to also the mindset shift. So a lot of the work I do, I use systems theory thinking, and so a lot of that kind of starts from the base of saying, so what mindset is actually creating this organization, or what are the mindsets involved within that? Because the mindsets of an organization inform the kind of relationships and power that we all have, which inform the processes and structures and frameworks that we build and the decisions we make. So it all kind of starts with our mindsets. So that mindset of going from being fixer, I'm the fixer and I do that stuff, I'm the go-to person, I make the decisions, to being the enabler is a huge shift in letting go. And that can feel so scary. It's a very scary place to be, because you're not in control anymore, or directly feel in control necessarily, although you are in control. So I think that shift is quite a key one on from the mindset perspective, is how do we let go as leaders or managers? And if we want our organization to grow, that's something we have to continually do. And how do we do that? I guess it's, if it's quite a scary, vulnerable place to be, then how do we coach and develop our teams to be able to do the things that we feel kind of sit with us, that often end up being bottlenecks with us if we don't let go? I think that's a good sign that there needs to be a shift, is there's a kind of bottleneck with us. and your people will tell you that, you know, they'll be like, oh God, I need a decision on that thing that I sent you 2 weeks ago, and you know, you will know that it's not quite working, it's not quite flowing as it should. So what does that look like, you know, kind of coaching and developing your team? And I think it's, you know, often it's about like choosing the easiest thing to let go of, to do something that's quite simple, that you can just take that first step and it feels okay, and then you build the confidence to be able to do it. You know, it's almost like a muscle in the brain to kind of get it working, and then build it and build it and build it. So for me, that's kind of where a lot of this starts, is that kind of switch from totally being in control and fixing to beginning to let go and trusting other people as well.
Yeah. Which, Sarah, are you finding, Sara Cottrell, are you sort of, you know, finding and seeing and feeling the same?
Yeah, for us, the conversation's been around trust, which I think is similar, is the same thing. So the mindset around, can I trust my team to deliver, and can they trust me to be supportive? So trust works two ways. Sometimes I think that people think it works one way, but actually, can my team trust that I've set the right expectations for them? Are they clear about what's expected of me? Can I trust that I can have a conversation when things go wrong? Do I feel safe? Do I feel safe to fail, to get it wrong, to experiment, to try stuff out? I think trust for me is the foundation. And we've had a lot of conversations about trust and leaders role modeling the behaviors and the things that they need to do to build that trust. Because, and I guess it's a conversation I've had with business owners over the years as well. It's like, do you actually trust your team to deliver? Well, no, not really. So what do you need to do to build that trust? And what does that look like for you, so that you can start to have, to step away? Because you have to have that trust to be able to step away. And that's the mindset that you're trying to get to. So I know that when we've done it before, it's around, what are you looking for from them? What would good look like? Have that conversation and then follow up with that. It's those sorts of conversations really that are crucial and important, and build on that, setting that foundation of, you know, can they trust you to be there and to support them when they need it, to ask questions, to coach, to, you know, to do all of those things, because, you know, you want to trust them, but they've got this trust that works the other way as well. And can they trust you? And I think that's part of that mindset shift within an organization, that trust and that feeling of safety, that I'm safe, that somebody's got my back. That's really important, I think. And I think those are the conversations that we've been having.
Sarah King, what are some of the things that we should be, let's sort of talk about some sort of more of the sort of practical sort of advice. What are some of the things that, you know, leaders and business owners, because we're talking sort of to both, you know, both audiences, what should they be thinking about now as we come out of the other side? And I know this isn't going to be this isn't going to be oh, okay, well, you know, we're out of it and let's crack on. We're still only, I think, at the start of what new leadership, you know, may look and feel like. But what are the things that do you think that they should be thinking about now as we come out sort of the other side and we do sort of step into this new, you know, these new roles?
I think right now, because I'm hearing so much how exhausted people are, and you know, kind of been holding this, everything coming out of pandemic for the last 18 months. I think right now it's almost like leaders need a pause or reflection, or just even recognizing and sharing that actually where they're at. Because, you know, I think this idea of like leader as a hero, you know, a hero charging ahead who's always got the energy and is always up for it. I mean, it doesn't exist. That's not a human being. That is some kind of superhero who aren't human beings. So, you know, I think it's really recognize that kind of humanness, and that, you know, if we're exhausted, and be vulnerable and openly share some of that, and how do we deal with that together and move forward from that place. Because I think covering up stuff like that and just charging ahead, you know, leads to even worse things than just exhaustion, leads to absolute burnout and lots of stress and overwhelm. And so I think there's a little bit of like, we need to look after ourselves a little bit at the moment to begin to build our own resilience coming out of the pandemic. because we're supporting everyone else through that as well at work. So, you know, we've got to really look after ourselves to be able to do that. And also feeling like stress and overwhelm and all of those kind of quite negative overload emotions and symptoms they kind of really affect us physically and mentally. And what they do tend to do is kind of close down our minds to possibility, to creativity. And actually, well, research, so scientific research shows they inhibit those things. So, you know, if we're feeling exhausted and overwhelmed and stressed and anxious, we're not going to be able to have the great conversations that Sarah talked about. We're not going to be able to do, you know, develop those relationships on the level they need to be developed at. We're not going to be able to have, like, you know, the creativity that we need coming out of the pandemic to grow our businesses. So I think there has to be a recognition that this is where we are, and if we are feeling like that, we just need to look after ourselves for a bit to be able to get back on track and have more vitality and energy to be able to kind of take our businesses forward post-pandemic. There's vast amounts of opportunities that will be out there, and we need to be shipshape to be able to do that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know we had the conversation sort of, you know, pre-prep on this conversation about, I think it was a recent interview with one of the leading authors of our industry, and she was saying that the role of the leader now is the creative, the collaborator, the listener, and, you know, to have insight, creativity and imagination, but more importantly, authenticity and legitimacy. And you listen to it and you think, yeah, but at a time when, like we were saying, it feels like everybody has just run a marathon but was preparing for a sprint, that's a lot to take on. That's a lot, you know, that there's probably 4 or 5 different roles in that already, and like you said, on a brain that is already overloaded, that's going to have an effect, isn't it? That's going to...
Absolutely, yeah. So, you know, the nature of stress and stress hormones is that they're part of our survival mechanism, right? So, you know, that's ultimately that's what's been one of the success stories of the human race, is that we have this survival mechanism which kind of helps us to thrive and to overcome difficulties and challenges. However, when that's overplayed and you know, you're being, I know it's a kind of an old bit of a well-used phrase, but if you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, that's an instant kind of hit of like adrenaline and stress hormones to get you out of that situation. You know, you can do that for an hour, but if you've got those levels of stress hormones in your system for 18 months, that really isn't good. That's, you know, that's kind of really bad for anyone's physical and mental health. So it's about how do we kind of you know, how do we get ourselves out of that and kind of pause to recognize that, because we're in that survival mode. We're only concerned about us, really. You know, we've got the blinkers on because we're stressed. We can't really focus. And research really shows that being in that mode inhibits compassion for others and things around us. We can't do that kind of relational piece. We can't do the, you know, the kind of things to care for ourselves or the others around us, or even the environment or anything that the world is calling of us right now as leaders. So and also, I think, you know, I speak to so many organisations that put on like tons of wellbeing staff, and people are too busy to access it as well. So that's not the solution. You know, the solution is about how do we really look after ourselves, and a lot of that is about mindset. So what are we putting on others? What are organisations putting on their people? And actually, what are we putting on ourselves? Because quite often, you know, you know, there can be a mindset of my value is through my delivery. My value is through, you know, what I physically produce, and to, you know, sometimes to the detriment of my own my own well-being. So there's I mean, so much there to unpick in that kind of psychological space and that very human space about actually what do we need just to look after ourselves right now, and be able to have create the conditions where we can collaborate and have great conversations, and because they're the things that are going to move our business forward, and they're the longer term things. Stress is very short term, our focus is very short term.
Sarah, Sara Cottrell, what's your thought in terms of, because obviously from a larger sort of organisation perspective, there is that very real sort of conversation about well-being, isn't it? And like I said, I know that even I'm getting bothered from my business perspective about well-being of employees and apps and seminars on how to relax and all of those things which are coming out. And actually, what we're saying is that we need to just pause, reflect, decide, move forward. What's the thought from from your side? Because I know you've done a huge amount of work. Zurich has done a huge amount of work in terms of this space. What are you seeing? What's sort of what's your thought in terms of that leadership? What's needed now?
From a Zurich perspective, we've got a huge wellbeing program, and it's really well taken up, and there's lots of stuff available to people. But I think, going back to Sarah's point, what's really important for our leaders in particular is that self-awareness around, and it's fundamental to leadership, right? Self-awareness around your own self-care, and if you don't take that self-care, the impact that it has on others and your relationships. Because self-care and self-management, I think, is core and fundamental to us being good and effective leaders in terms of what we do. So, the pace is moving very quickly. It's important. I mean, we've been encouraging people to take time out, take their holidays, because people weren't taking their holidays, to make time for themselves. However, you have to be self-aware enough and you have to reflect enough in order to do that. So asking others if they've seen a change, just doing some really basic stuff around, really reflecting on yourself, taking that time, but actually breaking the cycle, going for a walk, doing really simple stuff, having a telephone call rather than a Zoom call, taking your commute time to do something that you at home if you're working at home. So really simple stuff, just to make that space to check in with yourself, and that self-awareness, I think, is so important. The world is moving quickly, it's only going to accelerate, and we really need to take this opportunity to think about what we want to do next, because this is a real pivotal moment for a lot of businesses, for us as an organisation, but a lot of small businesses as well, around thinking about what we want to do next. We've got a real opportunity to do that. It's quite exciting, but it's also quite challenging, because we're going from a place where we might feel a bit exhausted, but actually this might energize us. This kind of creative new way of thinking about what we could do in the future could be just what we're looking for. So it's really thinking about, how do we make time to re-energize ourselves, to really think about what we want from our businesses, how we want to be as leaders, and to really refresh and consider what that looks like for us. This pandemic has moved things quickly, but it's also given us a chance to redesign and rethink what we want to do for ourselves, but also for our relationships, for our families, but also for future generations. It's not just, the day-to-day, although it feels like that. It's kind of, I think, so, what Sarah is saying, and kind of what I'm saying, is take that time out, really, really think about what you want, really think about what you're doing and the behaviors and the impact of that, and really think about what you want that to be. Because if you're working with a team, it's not just on you, you've got a whole team of people who can support you, who have got ideas, who've got solutions, who can work with you. I mean, why would you employ somebody if they weren't going to be able to bring that to your organization? We employ them because we think they'll be better at doing the job that we will do. So make the use of that. And I think sometimes we forget as leaders to do that. We take it all on ourselves. We don't let that go. We have to trust that people will have the answers that we're looking for. And I think that's so important. And Sarah's right, if we are stressed, then your capacity to hear others is really diminished. And your space to create that time to do that listening is also diminished. But if you have a team and you're not delivering through others, then the capacity of your organisation or your business to deliver is also diminished. So we need to take time to think about the skills that we need to have those conversations, and to draw on things that, you know, will be really impactful for us individually, because that's why we start our own businesses, right? You know, because we want life to be better. And if it's not better than it was before, then we really should be asking ourselves that big question about why, you know, and this is now a time to really think about what we want going forward and getting some support and help with that as well.
And I think, you know, we've never, you know, we deal with organizations, you know, micro and SMEs in terms of change and growth. And, you know, one comes as a consequence of the other, but the significant level of change now is the one that is fundamentally different, I think. You know, the scale of the change and what's needed to support that change is so vastly different. And like I said, you know, we're having conversations with business owners of, you know, we reset the compass, you know, reset, you know, where we're going. You know, we talk in terms of destination, direction, roadmap, leader, team, and continuity. And all of those, that's a cycle, that's a circle that, you know, that you go on. And I think you're absolutely right. I think the destination and the direction of a lot of people have changed. Interestingly, what are a few of the things that people could do around that? So you were talking about people taking the time to reflect. From both of your perspective, that's quite hard. You know, I know I've done it with my business. You know, we've all been forced to sort of look at the way that we do things, and you sort of sit down and you think, yeah, I'll have a period of reflection. But you know, what are you advising your clients, or, you know, your teams? What are you actually advising them? What does that look like?
So from our perspective, what we've done quite significantly is encourage our leaders to go back and have conversations with individuals and their teams to kind of reset and refresh that purpose around what they're doing and what they're delivering, and to kind of reformulate and reset some of those ground rules together around, you know, how do we want to work? Where are we going to do our best work? What does that look like? And also, because we are working in a hybrid way now as well, the social rituals that sit around that. So how do we keep connected socially to build those relationships? So understanding our purpose, where we work, the rituals that we have in terms of, you know, the social side of things, keeping connected, and also those ground rules, so that everybody's clear around, you know, what does this new space look like? It's a real opportunity to do that. I think sometimes when you're running your own business, it's really easy to put off that time for self-reflection. And it's a bit like anything. It's a bit like exercising. It's a bit like dieting. You get out of the habit of doing it. And I think it's that discipline of making time to just have a quiet time to really think about what's happening, to really prioritize what you need to do next, even if it's for the next day or the next week. And I think one thing that's going to shift the agenda around your kind of agenda around what next for you, and, you know, it might be self, my team, and the business, you know, one thing in each of those areas that you can work on that's really small, that's really doable, that will help move forward into the space that you want to get to. You know, I think sometimes when we do reflection, we make it too big. You know, take the next small step. I think that's important. And, you know, what's easy, pick the easy things first.
Yeah, I like that. I like the one small step and three simple simple plans. Sara King, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so we use a process called Snorkel, which really helps not just leaders, but also anyone really, who take them kind of through a process. So if there's a particular question or a dilemma that someone has, they can use it to really to create that consciousness about, you know, the slowing down, but also create consciousness about what this is meaning for them. So it stands for different things. So the S is space, so about creating space. And like Sara said, that could even just be going for a walk. You know, that doesn't have to be anything grand. It can literally be walking around the block. And by doing that, you know, physiologically our bodies calm down, our heart rate slows, and our brains are able to kind of think much clearer as a result. So creating space is the first one. And then through creating space is really noticing. And that's particularly noticing what's going on in our bodies. So, you know, what's going on, you know, what are my feelings around like a challenge or a dilemma? What am I what are my thoughts, you know, what kind of regular thoughts come up around it, what emotions am I feeling related to that, perhaps what judgments have I got, which quite often comes from our thoughts, around it, to kind of just bring much more consciousness about, so where are we with that particular issue right now? And actually this is also where, you know, things like inclusiveness comes in, or the lack of, you know, we can really see it in ourselves quite clearly. So that's the N, noticing. And then from that place, the O is open curiosity. So from that place, you know, really asking yourself questions, you know, so what is going on here? What do I really want? What's my intention? What, you know, what kind of outcome are we looking for? Who should I involve? So that's really kind of beginning to ask much more open questions of a dilemma or a challenge. And then that unearths all the stuff that's in us that's quite often unconscious. So it's almost getting it all out on the table and going, oh, well, that, you know, that's obviously how I perceive this issue or this challenge, half of which I probably wasn't even aware of. And then from there, we can either reflect or reimagine. So what are the other possibilities and opportunities available to us? Is there another way of looking at it, or other information or kind of views that we could get? So how do we reimagine or reflect on that? And that's the R. And then from that, it's about a compassionate choice. So the C is about compassion and choice. So from all of that, what choice do we make to move forward? And then we start to get into A, which is the action. So from that compassionate choice, we then put something into effect. And then the L and Snorkel is learning. So following that action, what have we learned from it? So this is, and I can share a diagram with you for your listeners to have, if that's useful. But this is something that you can do like on yourselves. It's something you can do with a team as well. It's something you can do in a one-to-one or an actually much wider team as well. And it just, you know, I think one of the things that Sarah says is almost like unearthing that consciousness around, bringing much more consciousness to our decisions and where they come from, and what's driving them. So what are the values and our beliefs and our assumptions and all of that kind of mental models or mindset stuff that's driving them.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that is the thing, isn't it? You know, there's two brilliant, well, more than two brilliant pieces of information there, but I think, you know, it is around having something to help you, having a tool to help you go through that process. So before we close off then, and we've sort of touched on this already, what would be sort of the one tip? We asked this to all of our speakers, but what would be the one sort of small tip that you would give to people right now that they could go out and potentially do tomorrow to implement something that would, you know, that would allow them to start that process?
Sarah King, do you want to? Yeah,
sure. So I think, you know, I think something I've already mentioned, it's creating the space. So, and that's where it all starts really. So, you know, it's really challenging to have the connection with people until we've got the connection with ourselves, and that only comes by creating some space. Yeah, and whatever that looks like, whether that's a walk or whether that's meditating or whether that's a run or some other form of exercise or even cooking, or, you know, something that gets you out of that kind of analytical brain thinking, something which really releases that, and probably something that uses the body a bit more or taps into the body, to create some space. And then quite often the rest of it starts to flow from that place. But I think, you know, Sarah's right that it's really difficult to do those things, even though we know they're all good for us. And I think one of the tips to try and do more of it is to create a habit. So, you know, whether that's starting by doing a particular thing at a certain time of the day or a certain day of the week, it's almost forcing the creation of a habit that feels clunky at first, but then it kind of really serves us and really helps us to create more space where everything else just flows from.
So Sara Cottrell, then, one tip that you would give people sort of right now in terms of from an audience perspective about what they could go out and do tomorrow in order to sort of, you know, implement something that would be really useful, what advice would you give them?
So I think the important thing, and building on Sarah's S in Snorkel, is around that space and about creating that time and space. But when you've created that time and space, you know, business owners are very much action orientated. They like just to get on and do things. So reflection can be quite a challenge. So I suppose my recommendation or suggestion would be to actually go and talk to somebody, to have somebody who you perhaps work with, a coach, a business mentor, somebody you can bounce your ideas off. You can actually talk to and externalize what's going on in your head, and to make sense of it, because just actually saying out loud sometimes can be really helpful. If you haven't got a coach or business mentor, just record it and play it back to yourself and be your own judgment. Sometimes just listening back can make you hear things that you didn't hear before. I think things get jumbled up in our heads. We don't always hear what we're saying to ourselves when we've got the stories that we're telling ourselves. So if we can externalize that and actually say it out loud, it's really, really, really helpful in terms of getting that external perspective and that different point of view. And I would suggest that that's one thing to try, just to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. That was a very, very good conversation. I've written plenty of notes around my page. There's a couple of things, from both of you that I think are really sort of key. Like I said, I think we started talking about, leadership and this sort of sense of uncertainty and chaos that we're sort of currently in, and that we are sort of on the sort of the next phase of what that leadership might look like. For me, there was a couple of things, just in terms of sort of actions. And I think one of them is, what do I do? I think, Sarah King, this was yours. What do I do? What do I want to let go of? And what do I allow others, enable others to do? And I think that's, from what you've said, it's one thing that sort of I've picked up, which from an advice perspective, I think is great. Just one small thing can then start, a different sort of set of like I said, of behaviours and habits and everything. So for me, I think it would be, what do we want to let go? We often talk about the bottom 25%, what do we let go of and what do we share? And, I think that's really, it's really good from our perspective. So thank you very much, both of you. I know we'll have a number of resources available to be able to support this, this subject in this conversation, including we've got a couple of extra podcasts for you to listen to and books that we can recommend that, if you want to explore the conversation a little bit more. Sara King, I know that you've offered to do a guest blog for us in terms of this subject, which is great, and we will let you know once that is live and on the system. And yeah, look out. We do, we're always on the lookout for sort of guest speakers and people who want to sort of provide content in terms of blogs. From our next session perspective, we'll be looking at managing the burn in terms of sort of overwhelm and burnout, and we'll also be looking at maximising the productivity in terms of hybrid workspaces, because I think that's the next natural area. So those are the next two sessions that are coming up from the Shed Talks at Rowan Consulting. Thank you very much, ladies, again, and thank you to listening to everybody who is out there. This has been a Shed Talk by Rowan Consulting, HR and organisational design specialists working with business owners and leaders in order to structure their business during times of change or growth. And my goodness, we're in it right now. If you've liked what you have heard today, please share this information wherever you are listening to this podcast or video. You can subscribe to our Rowan Consulting YouTube channel. We will make sure all of that information is available. If you want further information, you're very welcome to join our mailing list to hear all of the shots that are coming up over the next couple of months. Simply visit www.rowanhr.com. Thanks again for listening. Stay well. Thank you, ladies. We will make sure that your details are sent out on the show notes so people can get in contact. Hopefully you're happy for us to share those details out. But thank you again. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you all soon.